Hello and welcome to PM Agenda. I'm David Spears. The big banks are under fire once again, this time over bank fees. A report from the Reserve Bank today revealed that the big banks reaped about $1.6 billion in fees last year. That's an increase on the previous year of almost $1 billion. This is, of course, despite the government offering unprecedented guarantees, courtesy of the taxpayer, of bank lending. Well, is this justified? Joining us first up, the Shadow Minister for Finance, Senator Helen Coonan. Senator, welcome to the program.
Hi, David.
What do you make of this report? Do you think bank fees are over the top?
Well, look, I think from what's been reported of the report, it certainly seems to be something that warrants some concern. Particularly, as you mentioned in your introduction, the fact that there's been unprecedented intervention into the markets to assist the big banks with the problems with the global financial crisis and with potential runs on deposits. All of that, together with the wholesale guarantee, have put the banks in a very good position, and I think attracted some legitimate criticism as to how it will all play out, how eventually you'll exit the banks from all of this assistance and support. So the fact that on top of this there's been what appears to be and what may be an unprecedented increase in fees is very concerning, and I think we should look very critically at the report. It's a bit difficult to be more precise than that until you read it and see the basis for the bank's calculations and conclusions.
Yeah, well, I can tell you that the Reserve Bank saying in the report that the reason here is not because fees have increased, because people, the use of banks has increased, banking services have increased. That's what's driven the increased collection, not an actual fee hike per se. Does that assuage any of your concerns there at all?
Well, I think you'd really need to have a look at the data, perhaps disaggregate the information. It's often a matter of how you put all these pieces of information together that gets you to one conclusion. If you look at it a different way, perhaps you might be warranted in coming to a different view. But I think the bottom line here is that it will be horrifying to many consumers to consider that they might have been clipped by the banks with excessive fees, and it certainly will warrant all of us, certainly on all sides of the political process, having a very good look at it.
If we can move on, Senator Coonan, as you know, there's been increased focus on politicians' perks this week after what's been happening in the UK with the expenses scandal there. There's criticism in Australia about the electorate allowance. It's at least $32,000 for an MP. No accountability as to how they spend it. The unspent amount they can pocket each year. Do senators get the same allowance?
Yes, senators do, and I must say that so far as I'm aware, I don't know of anyone who misuses this particular allowance. It's there, obviously, to assist you in looking after your electorate. Senators obviously have a pretty big electorate, obviously a state to look after. So there are some considerable calls on how you spend that amount in the interests of your elected representatives, and you, of course, must not otherwise not account for it if you haven't spent it. So whichever way you look at it, it is accounted for either as a taxable sum or as a spent sum. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think many of us would stay elected if we didn't spend pretty much the majority of it for the purpose for which it was intended.
Well, what do you spend it on? I mean, 30-odd grand is a fair bit to get through each year. Where does it go? Well,
it's spent on various issues. I mean, it's spent on items of office equipment, small things that aren't otherwise provided for as part of your entitlement. For instance, if you're particularly into perhaps more modern technology, you buy that. For instance, I bought an iPhone. I bought that out of my own pocket. I think it's important for me to be able to have that.
With your electorate allowance?
Well, it's a deductible amount. I haven't yet made out a return for it, but it possibly could be something that would be justified. I particularly wanted that phone when I was communications minister, and I was able to eventually get one in the States. I tried to keep up with technology, and I mean, people spend it on different amounts. I wouldn't want to, and different things. I wouldn't want to be preempting the way in which everybody accounted for it. But if it isn't spent that